That's only 2.5 hours?
Good afternoon, folks. I would say possibly good morning, but like government, nothing ever starts exactly on time. My name is Michael Cashman. I'm the Plattsburgh Town Supervisor, and I am extremely excited to yet again have an opportunity to host one of our fine commissioners to talk about the state of the New York State budget and also where we are going in the future. But before we do that, there's some individuals that are going to give some remarks, and I want to introduce our new co-chair for the REDC. He doesn't have to speak today, but I wanted to make sure that he was getting some credit here. James McKenna for new co-chair for the REDC. Can we give him a round of applause? And somebody that has been asked to speak today, a local champion for the North Country, and has been able to no longer be the co-chair, but did some fine work over a number of years. A friend of the North Country, a champion of the North Country, is Gary Douglas. Can we give him a round of applause? And at this point, I would like to introduce our esteemed chairman of the Clinton County Ledge, Mr. Harry McManus.
Thank you. First of all, welcome, Commissioner. We're glad you're here, and welcome everybody. New York State has been very generous to Clinton County in recent years, particularly with capital projects associated with the Plattsburgh International Airport and the economic development that will come with the Norsk investment. Per capita investment by the state of New York in Clinton County is certainly one of the highest in the entire state of New York. So we always enjoy an opportunity to welcome a representative from the governor's office to the North Country. First, we congratulate the governor and legislature on a timely budget. We can easily accept a minor delay of 3 hours past the midnight deadline. Timely budgets have been the hallmark of this administration, and we applaud the continued diligence towards the attainment of this goal. The 2019-2020 budget contains two significant sales tax reforms that will assist Clinton County. First, the budget contains a provision that updates New York sales tax collection and to ensure that the sales tax owed on internet transactions are collected. And secondly, the budget includes a provision repealing a sales tax exemption for energy service companies. Both these measures will in fact increase sales tax collections, benefiting both Clinton County and local municipalities. The budget also contains a modest increase in funding for Clinton Community College to assist with operating expenses. We're very proud of Clinton Community College and welcome any measure to help sustain this valuable institution. Lastly, the budget contains election reforms, as well as appropriations to implement early voting opportunities. As a government teacher for over 40 years, I can say that increasing the ease and opportunity to cast a vote has a fundamental value for society, particularly in more rural areas where distance to polling places increases the difficulty to participate in the election process. So again, welcome to Clinton County, Mr. Commissioner, and thank you for the opportunity to learn more about our 2019-2020 budget and the impacts on our residents. Thank you very much.
Before I invite the commissioner to come up and give some remarks, I just want to identify a number of things that the town of Plattsburgh is very appreciative of. We have been leading the good fight with this administration for the tax cap. And we believe that this is a responsible thing to do on behalf of taxpayers. So we're very appreciative that we were finally able to get that to be a permanent thing. We stand shoulder to shoulder with this administration, as well as the legislators down in Albany. And that is allowing us to continue to promote a region that people want to continue to live, work, play, and invest in. And an example of that is the historic investments that we have received here locally. From Norsk Titanium to the Institute for Advanced Manufacturing to the Plattsburgh International Airport. And those historic investments are important by themselves, but the reason that they're more important is it then becomes the municipality's responsibility to optimize those historic investments into ways that paves a way for the future, and so things don't just stall. What we are doing in the town of Plattsburgh is we are doing a smart growth plan. We became the first community here that became a NYSERDA clean energy community. We continue to pair with the various agencies that the state has to offer so that we can continue to pave the way forward for Plattsburgh, the greater Plattsburgh region, and as Gary and his friends would say, the Adirondack Coast, so that we can continue to be an international, global location that people are peeking into their portfolios and saying, we want to be part of that. The other part to it is the town of Plattsburgh is leading its way with infrastructure development. We are working on a $24 million water capital plan. And when we started this, we knew that the state would respond and step up and help us out. Last year, we received over $3 million, bringing the tax burden down, allowing us to continue to be a place where companies could hook up, and it's about health and safety, sustainability, and economic development. Who better to talk about sustainability and taking care of our water and our environment but our DEC commissioner? At this point, it is a pleasure to introduce a friend in government and a friend in local service to our constituents. Basil, come forward. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Should have been taller. It used to be before this adventure started.
You always stand tall, Ben.
Well, listen, I want to start just with some recognition. Really, you really have some. You know it already, but you've got some real powerhouses in this room. Between Mike and Harry, Gary Douglas, Randy Preston, Janet Dupree is here as well. City of Plattsburgh Mayor Colin Reed, and many others. You've got some real powerhouses in the room. I mean, folks that come down to Albany, and Gary Douglas has been known to talk about buses on a regular basis. This is the only place north of New York City where you have to look out for New York City school buses, New York City buses. It's amazing. Just drove down the road here and had a chance to look at that factory. Wow, it is unbelievable what this region is doing right now. I read somewhere that folks talk about this as sort of a hidden gem of a city and a region. And it really is. You get off the highway and you see this incredible industry happening right here, and a real rebirth. And it's exciting. It's exciting. Jim McKenna, he's going to be a fantastic addition to the REDCs. The stuff that Jim has done with Roost and branding the Adirondacks and business development in the Adirondacks is really exciting. Been a great partner over the years, certainly of ours. And I look forward to seeing what you're going to pull off on the REDCs. North Country's always done well with the REDCs, so you've got some powerhouses already on there. But I know you're going to bring lots of creativity and bring that Roost feel now to the entire North Country. So great to be back in this part of the world. I really do love it up here. Last time I was here, there was a big forest fire, which was fun. So we fought that for 30 days. The Altona fire last summer, which was a big deployment of state resources, but we had great relations with local partners. I think Mike actually reached out to me and said, whatever you need for that fire, and we got that under control. It took us a few days. But we've been up here, had a chance to be here up here for the budget last year, in the North Country a lot. It is a second home for me. My wife's from Watertown. I spend lots of time at Fort Drum and have fun up in the North Country. But so I am a New York City area person originally. I now think I will never go back. I'm going to live in the North Country, or at least in upstate, for the remainder of my breathing years. But I know you didn't come here to hear about my plans of where I'm going to live. You're here to listen to me go through the highlights of the state budget. Harry and Michael certainly talked about some of the real highlights. I mean, the ongoing work that doesn't get talked about necessarily as widely between water and the NYSERDA efforts that we're doing to make the town, help the town become greener and realize its visions. Smart growth planning, that's fantastic. So the tax cap, one of the big accomplishments over the last 6 years, and I'm glad to hear that you're feeling that up here. And of course, you know, all that we've done to work with you. You've been great advocates to the budget. And we need local partners to get big budgets done. It's a $175 billion budget, But unless you can communicate that locally, it becomes very difficult to get some of these tough things done in the budget. And this really was one of the most ambitious budgets I've been a part of. This is the 8th budget now I've been with the governor on. Really interesting process, I call it that. It starts, actually the next budget starts now. We start talking about the next big set of initiatives, and we have to work for many, many months up until really January when the governor presents the budget, and then we hash it out with the legislature over the course of many, many sleepless nights. But truly, to call this an ambitious budget would be an understatement. I'm going to just run through some of the highlights, but we were able to accomplish more in this budget, just from an environmental perspective, really than we have done the last almost 8 years combined. A really outstanding budget. So the governor certainly applied this thinking agency-wide. I think you mentioned 3 hours late. The governor doesn't believe in 3 hours late. If it's not 3 hours early, it's late. So I talk more about that in length. But it was a sweeping agenda. I'll go through all of these points, really 20 big agenda items, and many actually beyond this. I won't talk about the MTA fund and restructuring, but I do know you're thinking about that with Nova Bus being just around the corner. And we did get it done. We got it done on time. Most importantly, right off the bat, the tax cap. Amazingly, over the 6 years that we've had 2% tax cap, we've saved $25 billion for New Yorkers. That's a huge number, staggering number. So by making this permanent, you can just think of all those dollars instead of coming into, due to increases going into government coffers. That's not staying with folks, staying in communities. Middle class tax cut. Again, every single person in New York is paying less in taxes now than they were 8 years ago. So now we've had a chance to work on this and dropped our rates really for the middle class down to almost unheard of levels. If you're making between 40 and 150, you're paying 5.5%. If you're making between 150 and 300, 6%. So we continued those middle class tax cuts. Governor's talked a lot about the impact of the changes in federal tax structure. As you know, you used to be able to deduct state and local taxes from your federal tax bill. Well, obviously that's gone away. It's gone away in New York and 11 other states. Had a huge impact on what we're seeing at the state level in terms of tax receipts, but also it's having a big impact on ratepayers and taxpayers. I know it's just a couple days after you all filed your taxes. I got mine done just on time. And had a chance to think about this issue, certainly, and how that's impacting New York. We already send $36 billion a year out of state, more than we get in return. All right, that's happening it's been happening on a yearly basis for many, many years. The changes in the tax structure now, in fact, have raised that number to $51 billion. We're paying $51 billion more out of New York State than we get in return. So the removal of the state and local tax deduction has actually increased the burden on New York taxpayers. The first time ever that we've been paying federal taxes on state taxes, which is almost an unheard of thing. This is something we did not solve. This couldn't have been solved in the budget. This is an effort the governor has launched at the national level, working with many other governors. We're trying to get the federal government to think twice about this because it will impact taxpayers for many, many years. The governor's standing there with 4 other governors from around the country. If you talk to him or if you hear from him, the governor is pushing this, and he'll continue to push this over the next few months. On affordable care, it's no secret that we've been at odds with the federal government on affordable care and the Affordable Care Act. So this year in this budget, we were successful in codifying a number of key provisions of the Affordable Care Act into state law, so that no matter what happens in Washington, D.C., no matter what happens at the federal level, New York's health insurance is protected. Really important. Pre-existing conditions, the 10 essential health benefits, cost sharing for preventative care, prohibiting, limiting annual or lifetime coverage, and then codifying all this into the marketplace in New York State. Very important for New Yorkers. Infrastructure has been a hallmark of the governor's tenure. and already $100 billion, a massive infrastructure program around the state. And if you've driven the state, you might agree with that. Certainly here in Plattsburgh, and what we've done with the Plattsburgh International Airport, thanks to you all, thanks to Gary for pushing this. This is one of many, many projects around the state, and have driven the state quite a bit, and just drove across the new Mario Cuomo Bridge yesterday. It is astounding to see this amount of infrastructure happening at the same time. And you almost don't know how it's all happening at once, because I know the people that are in charge of these things, and they all have day jobs and families, but they're managing to rebuild the state, the way it looks, the way it feels, the way it operates. Critically important for economic development to have an infrastructure that can sustain travel. So this year we're actually launching a new $150 billion program, again, a statewide figure. North Country education, the North Country school aid is up by 3.42%. Our education spending, Medicaid spending is increasing. I have a slide on how education spending has increased and Medicaid spending has increased, while government, largely government spending has decreased. But you can see the governor's putting significant resources into schooling, and prioritizing funding for poorer schools, a big issue statewide. We need to ensure that there's equity in how funds are being spent around the state, and certainly within poorer school districts. An increase in capital facility support for the North Country SUNY schools. Again, very happy students there. You can see they like the capital increase. It's being received well on campuses. We hope they will hear about that. And also the Excelsior Scholarship Program, which I know is working very well. Now increasing the income threshold to $125,000, which is good for middle income families. That's going to help more than 4,800 North Country students go to college tuition free. And then on the criminal justice side, fixing our criminal justice system, speedy trial reform. The horror stories you hear about pre-trial detention, where some folks are held in pre-trial detention for up to 2 years. Some stories out of Rikers Island down in New York City that make your head spin. So speedy trial reform will help that. And discovery reforms seem sensible to require prosecutors and defendants to share all information. But for many reasons over the years that has not been secured. DREAM Act, finally got the DREAM Act done. $27 million program, the Jose Peralta in memory of the late senator, to give all New Yorkers access to higher education. And then, close to my heart, a series of environmental initiatives, including launching the Green New Deal, which commits the state to 100% carbon-free electricity by 2040. And there's so many elements to this that I won't get into, but I'm extraordinarily excited. We had an offshore wind. I know there's lots of onshore wind up here in the North Country. We had an offshore wind conference in New York City 3 days ago. It had 1,400 businesses from around the world show up. Not advocates, not people with placards or banners or streamers. 1,400 businesses to take advantage of the commitments we're starting to make now to offshore wind. We've got onshore wind booming. Solar is growing faster than ever, employing far more people now in New York than in fossil fuel industries. So this mandate is something we have to do. I don't think there's any secret that we believe firmly that there's a real problem with climate change here, not just in New York, obviously worldwide. It's changing the way we experience weather, we experience our forests. There are literally fish populations that are leaving New York's waters on the marine side and going north because the waters are warming. We have invasive species coming up here into the North Country impacting our forests that we've never seen before because it's simply just getting warmer out. And the storms are getting more and more frequent, more and more devastating. So one of the initiatives we were able to pull off this year was banning plastic bags. And maybe some of you see these bags that get stuck in trees and stuck in our waterways. And enough is enough with the plastic. So by March 1st next year, we will have no longer have plastic bags in stores. And there's a number of exemptions on the paper side in terms of fees, but now localities can assess a fee on paper and keep some of those funds. EPF, the Environmental Protection Fund, which helps us fund many of your programs, $300 million a year. It's now the 4th year of $300 million a year. Some of the plastic bag fees, 60% of the plastic bag fees are going to go back into the Environmental Protection Fund. So it's almost a cycle where you're deterring a certain amount of behavior on the plastic side, but putting those funds that are generated from paper bag fees into the fund itself. And then water, applaud you for the work you're doing on water. The hidden infrastructure, certainly the ribbon cuttings are less sexy when it comes to a sewage line or a water treatment plant, but really, as you know, when you're a water-rich state like we are, and this is one of our greatest natural assets as a state, if we're not safeguarding that, we're really putting ourselves behind the 8 ball over the next 20 or 30 years. Our infrastructure is collapsing, and we've succeeded in putting aside this huge chunk of money, now $3 billion total over the next 4 years, going into water infrastructure, will help to secure New York's position. You start talking about water contamination and water crises around the country, shortages of water. If we don't do something about that right now, we're certainly going to be less well off as a state. And really, honestly, and some of you have helped us to shape this, but the governor came into office back in 2011 with $11 billion budget deficit. And at that point, you think perhaps that's the time to start trimming programs that didn't seem to have an economic impact. The governor did the exact opposite with environmental spending. We started to put money back into the environment instead of closing parks, opening parks. Instead of pulling back on the Environmental Protection Fund, which had been slashed, we started reinvesting in that because we know these dollars get out into communities and they help to improve the fortunes of communities. Every dollar out of the EPF is $7 into projects. So there's real money to be generated here. And this $3 billion investment, we start to talk about the total delta of need between now and 20 years from now could be as much as $80 billion in terms of water infrastructure on the clean water side and sewage and water provision. So we're going to shrink it by providing these grant funds up. And that opens up our loan program, which for many years had been unsubscribed. We have $1 billion a year in loans that we put out, zero interest loans. That generates a total project of about between $3 billion in grants going out. That's about a $10 billion program almost per year in grant making. That's going to change the landscape in terms of water infrastructure. I won't spend all my time on water infrastructure, I promise. Improving our democracy. So a number of key reforms on our voting system and how we elect our officials, moving to an election holiday, eliminating restrictions on voting before noon upstate, which seems to be a no-brainer. I wanted to vote on a primary day before noon, and I couldn't. I'm sure you all experienced that up here as well. So $10 million for early voting as well, synchronizing the federal and state elections, pre-registration for minors, ensuring universal transfer registration. So when you move, you don't have to go through a burdensome process, and advanced same-day registration. Public trust is important, and that, of course, begins in campaign finance and closing the LLC loophole, which is something we've been talking about for many years. We finally got that done. Public financing as well, $100 million a year now annually available for public campaign finance, which was going to help get private money out of the election system. And of course, our longstanding and strong partnership with unions, extending Janus protections and standing with organized labor, which is a critical goal of the governors, and we had some success this year in protecting union rights. Affordable housing, again, a big issue statewide, certainly upstate. Enacting source of income protections, and very importantly, continuing a $20 billion program to invest in affordable housing. Passing the Child Victims Act, again, something that had been talked about for many, many years. Now removing some of the barriers to enable people now later in life as adults to to seek justice for crimes committed when they were young. And then, of course, protecting LGBTQ rights. We got the critical provisions done, enacting agenda and banning the practice of conversion therapy. So all of this and much, much more, again, doing it within our means. Here's the wonky slide. I actually kind of like this slide because it shows an adherence to being smart with your money. I shouldn't like this slide. If you look at the very bottom, executive agencies, 0.5% increase in spending. That means that DEC as an executive agency isn't getting necessarily a major increase. But I'll tell you why it's really good for DEC, okay? We have spending across the board, state operating funds, 2%, that's the biggest and most important number. 9 years of 2% spending, lowest in modern history. I mentioned school aid and state Medicaid and health spending, increasing for many reasons beyond our control, and keeping executive agency spending low. That's how we get to 2% spending, okay? That's really important because in the old days, executive agency spending would spiral out of control. And we would get bigger, more inflated. You'd have all kinds of pork projects being thrown in without much concern for how that fit into the larger budget picture. And I tell you, I would take limited spending on an on-time budget any day over out-of-control spending and a budget that didn't get done on time. Because it provides me, as executive of an agency, with certainty as to what I'm supposed to be accomplishing for the year. And learning to live within my means and finding ways to become more efficient. We've become busier as an agency over the last 8 years, far busier. Our mission has increased tenfold, and I'm not joking. We're taking on more things than we ever have. And yet our staffing levels have remained largely constant, some increases where we had to get increases. And we're doing it, and we're succeeding. And I think that's something that all of the agencies now have learned, to live within their means. So, lowest state spend increases in history. You look at some of the past years, how spending has increased, and even under the Pataki administration, certainly fiscal conservatives, you had largely out of control spending. And this is the timely budgets, and that's a big deal. It's a big deal to get a budget done on time. You know that here at the local level, to get it done on time, to provide that certainty out there. These budgets, I have the luxury of only knowing on-time budgets, but I know the old days when things didn't get done for months. Albany would remain this sort of cauldron of uncertainty and chaos, and we've become far more disciplined. So, in total, this year with our budget, directing $4.18 billion for the North Country. It's a huge sum. Keeping the REDCs going. You're welcome. $750 million for the REDCs. North Country, again, as I mentioned in my earlier remarks, has done very well. Always very creative, and lots of great projects out there which have a real per capita impact, as you mentioned, Harry. Keeping the DRI moving, Downtown Revitalization Initiative, going. Very exciting DRI underway locally here. I've seen some of those conceptual designs, and it really is going to be great when this project is rolling across the state. So that's going to carry on through this coming year. Upstate Cellular Coverage Task Force. We obviously need solutions in the upstate area, Adirondacks in particular, on how to expand cell coverage. So now this is underway. And this is actually a picture. This is Michael Cashman, believe it or not, this winter. $82.5 million for new capital funding for water facilities, which are the anchor of our winter economy in the Adirondacks, in addition to snowmobiling. The water facilities are really fantastic, and yet we need to modernize them. I mean, there's a great deal of work that needs to be done still. And so I don't know if you landed that jump, but hats off to you. The state tourism is a multi-billion-dollar industry. I mean, it's a really incredible industry. And Jim can talk about that ad nauseum. I mean, we're seeing influx of tourism now into the Adirondacks that we've never seen. And now we're playing catch up with it. That's no secret there. But tourism downstate is also experiencing the same kind of growth. Catskills, Western New York, Finger Lakes. I mean, New York is really back on the map. I mean, back in the old days, you used to get in a plane and fly out to Yellowstone. Well, now people are just getting in their car, or in the train, or in a bus, and coming up to the Adirondack. So it's a good problem to have when you have this influx of people coming back up. You have to figure out, where to bring them, how to make their experience good enough so they want to come back. The Taste of New York program is actually one of those great experiences where you're bringing somebody to New York, you're giving them a good experience when they're on their way to their destination. It makes them want to come back. It's not just a tired rest area or the old bathrooms that you don't want to see or look at or ever come back into again. It's a beautiful facility, and you're eating or drinking New York products along the way. So this has been a really great program for us. We're going to keep that going. Opioid crisis is significant, as you know, nationally. This is no secret. So the governor has been clear he wants to do something about it. We're going to open a state addiction treatment center here, 16 residential programs and 9 outpatient programs to get ahead of this incredible crisis. This is something I hear all the time from him. There's still more work to be done. Really never to be satisfied with what you've accomplished. And this is a few policy initiatives through the budget. But really, that's almost our mantra in government. There's always more work to be done. Governor laid out a plan to establish a regulated adult use cannabis program. That's something that he'll be focusing on. Prevailing wage law to restore fairness and respect for working men and women. And a number of other initiatives, including getting legislation done on climate change. So we believe and we can prove that we are the most progressive state in the nation. We're living it every day through innovation, infrastructure, and reforming all of our various systems, criminal justice, education, otherwise. And together, we will build a greater North Country. You're building it. We want to be a partner on that. There's an amazing amount of excitement up here, and certainly I can speak on behalf of DEC. We are ubiquitous in this region. We continue to be that way, and look forward to working with you all over the coming year and coming years. So I want to thank you for hosting me up here. Really excited to be back up here with such great friends and learn a little bit about the history along the way. I decided to do a Google search on Plattsburgh on the way up here, and it's amazing how much American history has gone on through this region. I mean, really incredible. I mean, talk about back into the Revolutionary War, all the way up through the Cold War, the work on Plattsburgh Air Base, and you have a lot to be proud of up here. You really do, and you have an amazing natural resource, not just in the Adirondacks, but here on Lake Champlain, which many New Yorkers forget about this almost Great Lake, but it is really one of those really beautiful shorelines. What do you call it, Gary? The Adirondack shoreline?
Adirondack Coast.
Agarondack Coast? Absolutely right. It really is.
There's no whale watches though.
Not that you know of. Yeah. But again, thanks a lot. Good to see you all.
So, as we wrap up today, I always like to put it a little bit in a context because, there's a bit of a cheerleading that's going on with this budget, and there really is a lot to cheerlead. But I like to put it in the perspective of, who here is married out of curiosity? Raise your hand. Have kids, have a neighbor. We don't agree with those people 100% of the time, right? Okay? There's not any one of us that I think that will agree that with 100% of the stuff that's in the budget and the way the government works. But through strong partnerships and collaboration, and by you extending yourself by coming up here and engaging with us, we are able to continue to advance our local towns, villages, the city, the region, and the state. So thank you so much for coming up here. We continue to look forward to a strong partnership, and we also look forward to a strong partnership as a larger community as well, because the best ideas are yet to come. Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Well, agree wholeheartedly with Town Supervisor Michael Cashman that this was a cheerleading presentation, but we thought it was important to present it as it was presented. Obviously, there are different points of view on many, if not all, of the topics discussed at this presentation, but it was interesting to see what the governor and his office and staff's point of view was. So, thanks for watching Hometown Cable. If you have opinions on this, please feel free to contact your area state senator or state assembly person and pass along your concerns or questions to them.